to in a minute, also under the principle of statism, might makes right. In other words, if we're strong enough to do it and we can compel you to do it, then it's a right. It's a right thing for us to do. Now, people in the realm of statism are treated as subjects of the rulers. People are structured into social and economic classes. People have only such rights as rulers dictate. And land is treated as in the realm of the rulers. I live in a county right now where there's about 60 to 70% of the people that live in that county are federal government or state government employees, and they operate these federal lands. And they're closing down these lands. And we have less and less access to it. And now we're almost treated, no, we aren't treated like to access this land is a privilege. It's not even a right anymore. So somewhere the state has taken this land and is now converting it to its private realm through zoning, national or state parks. Problems are solved or symptoms are treated because the problems really aren't solved because they're never addressed because all of the laws that they passed to solve these problems are arbitrary. And today's laws that were passed to solve the problems of yesterday are now today's problems. Problems are solved, symptoms are treated by passing more laws, issuing new edicts, creating more bureaus, appointing more administrators, and increasing taxes to pay for these services. Taxes and government regulations are always oppressive, and this is statism. Benito Mussolini said there is a great silent continuous struggle. The struggle between the state and the individual, between the state which demands and the individual who attempts to evade such demands. Because the individual left to himself, unless he be a saint or a hero, always refuses to pay taxes, obey law, or go to war. Isn't this interesting? Here's the balance of nature. How does this work? We've got the will of individuals who just want to be left alone, and then we've got the will of the government who demands performance. And this is a problem that every government, every generation that has ever lived experienced this conflict. The founding fathers, when they broke away from Great Britain, they experienced this conflict as well. And they made certain decisions, which brings us up to what I'm going to talk to you about today. Fascism, according to this philosophy, a true great spiritual life cannot take place unless the state has risen to a position of preeminence in the world of man, in other words, God. The state becomes the paternal God, and man is subject to this paternal will. The curtailment of liberty thus becomes justified at once, cause of necessity, and this need of rising the state to its rightful position. Fascist ethics begin with the acknowledgement that it is not the individual who confers a meaning upon society, but it is instead the existence of human society which determines the human character of the individual. Founding fathers were confronted with the situation when they were stuck between the modern thought of the day, which was the divine right of kings, and they were experiencing the despotism of King George, and they came together under the First Continental Congress to discuss the abuses and usurpations of this king. And they had put together a list of grievances. They petitioned the king for redress of grievances. And the king not only ignored those petitions for redress, but answered those petitions with repeated injury. And so the founding fathers, the First Continental Congress, they came together to figure out what can we do. And it was a mess because it was too early to talk about separation, and everybody was trying to figure out, well, what do we do? How do we make the king obey the law? And it was an exercise in futility, which hindsight reveals. But at the time, they were really scared because they realized that this kind of conversation at all was punishable as an insurrection and ultimately an act of treason. And back then, an act of treason was punished by being drawn and quartered, boiled in oil, whatever dastardly thing that these. I won't get into the details, but it was really, really gross. If anyone watched Braveheart, William Wallace, there at the end of the show, that's the punishment for treason. Founding fathers were facing this thing. So they came together and had a conversation about what do we do. First Continental Congress, like I said, was a disaster. Second Continental Congress, they came up with the Declaration of Independence. Let's see what they said. The Declaration of Independence lays the philosophical foundation, the rudimentary principles upon which this nation rests. Now, it was a really interesting time because these people were separating from Great Britain, And here was an opportunity for first time in history to lay some foundations as to the natural order of things, the natural right of government versus man. And so Thomas Jefferson, who had already been writing down this vein, was appointed in a committee of three. Actually, it was five, but we'll go with Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, who ultimately wrote the Declaration of Independence. And he took the opportunity to lay the philosophical foundation and the rudimentary principles upon which this nation rests. And ultimately today, the Declaration of Independence defines the origins of the rights, duties of the people, and it defines the purpose for government. It prescribes the duties of the people. So if we ever want to understand the philosophy of this country, we need to look no farther than the Declaration of Independence to find that philosophy. Matter of fact, I will submit to you for your consideration that the Declaration of Independence clearly lays out the principle of individualism. According to the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Commission versus case, a Colorado Supreme Court case decided in 1962, the Supreme Court said the individual and not the state is the source and basis of our social compact. Sovereignty now resides and has always resided in the individual. Now, this is an amazing thing here. We need to stop and really soak this up. What did the court just say? The individual, not the state, is the source and basis of our social compact. Now, compared to what I just got through reading, this is not fascism. This is individual. We're on the other side of the scale here, and this is the Supreme Court 1962 telling us that this is the way it is. Sovereignty now resides and has always resided in the individual. Now, oh my gosh. So let's see what the Founding Fathers, do they agree with that? Did the Supreme Court get that from the Declaration of Independence? This is the introduction to the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to read it real quick. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. Oh, but wait a minute, let's highlight something in there that I want to really emphasize right here. And to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the law of nature and nature's God entitle them. Well, what is that? We're separating from the King of England, and we want to stand separate and equal to the King of England. Who are these renegade little colonies? How audacious a thing that they could do this. But they're declaring by this introduction that that's exactly what they're wanting to do. And a decent respect for the opinions of mankind require that they should declare these causes. Because this is what they want to do. They want to assume among the powers of the earth. What are the powers of the earth? Well, the powers of the earth at that time, kingdoms and serfdoms and governments. And the colonies wanted to stand separate and equal with everyone else on this planet. And so they did. And they went on to say, based upon these political philosophies, they didn't say that, but this is what they said. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And some say that word is unalienable. But for the sake of argument, we're not going to go there now. That's for another discussion. But for now, I'm going to use the word unalienable because I'm comfortable with it. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience has shown that mankind is more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Declaration of Independence. I'm not making this up, and if this sounds radical, it's only because of the degree that we've come off these principles. So now I'm going to go through each one of these principles. You notice at the top of the page, I've said we hold these truths to be self-evident. Now I'm going to go through a whole bunch of